All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is Tuesday, January 10th of 2023. Looking ahead to a 7-game NBA slate as well as a 10-game NHL slate. It is Tuesday, 2 more days till golf. Probably be building my golf lineups tomorrow, so looking forward to another PGA event. A cut event this week, was a no cut event last week, but will be a cut event this week. So it should be a little more fun. Going to get that Friday sweat going. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions that come in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not a member of our Discord, there's a link in the description below to get joined up. Highly recommend it. As always, a lot of good conversations happening there each and every day. People bringing up questions and ideas and getting a lot of feedback from a lot of really sharp people in the community and just anybody and everybody who participates. But that being said, if you are not in our Discord and you are just tuning in, have a question that you want to get answered, throw it in the live YouTube chat. We will get to all the questions before the end of the show. Promise you guys that. So, going to get SaberSim pulled up here, and we are going to get going. Our first question today came in from support, actually. Kind of a long one. I'm going to break it up into 2 parts here, but got some good feedback from the team on this one as well. Our main man, Scott, in the NHL streets, decided to jump in and give some thoughts. So, I will touch on Scott's response after getting this question out. All right. Question says, I've been with SaberSim for a while now, and I continue to make small adjustments to my process on a regular basis. I have a couple questions that I hope will aid in my daily process. First, hold on, I'm a little confused. First, what do you believe is more important for stacking type sports such as hockey or baseball? Dialing in stack/team exposures and letting individual player exposures fall where they lie, or dialing in individual player exposures and letting the stacks take care of themselves via player exposures? This is a good question. So Scott jumped in and talked a little bit about hockey, since that is a highly correlated sport. So I'm going to throw in his 2 cents here, and we will talk about it more. But for anyone in the NHL streets, I think this is a solid response. So Scott said, for part 1, I can speak to NHL here. I prefer to start by dialing in min uniques to get my stack exposures close to where I want them to be. And then I look at the individual players to see if I am over or underweight on anyone, but I don't like to tweak too much unless I have a real good reason to do so. I guess that means I'm more focused on team exposures first, but letting min uniques handle a lot of that for me. Players end up falling where they will lie most of the time as a result. I think this is really good feedback. This is kind of my sense too, right? It is a new year, so MLB season is only a couple months away. Should get started. Usually they have like a island March slate to kick it off, and then opening day is usually April 1st. But if you're playing NHL, looking ahead to baseball, where correlation is really important. I think these principles are sound from Scott here. I think that I wouldn't reverse engineer a stack. So a stack is a group of players from the same team usually, or from the same game, right? I think let it be that, and start from that point. So start by looking at teams, start by looking at games. Do not start with players and try to walk that back. I think that is probably not the way I would approach it. I would go about it a little more way Scott is going about it. Let me handle the team level, because I think handling it on a team level is easier, right? You got 10 games here. We're looking at 20 total teams. But if you look in the player pool, there are going to be hundreds of players, right? A couple hundred players, right? So what is it easier for me to juggle in my head? 20 teams or 200 players, just for the sake of example, right? that is where, I let SaberSim handle that part, right? So I'm going to say, okay, I'm interested in these stacks, and Scott is saying he's applying min uniques first and then making adjustments. I think that is the right way. See how many uniques you can get to decrease that inter lineup correlation, and then go back, spot check your exposures, your team stacks, your stack types, and your player exposures if there are certain players on your mind, and then make those adjustments after the fact, right? And then if you get to a point where it's like, okay, you've made too many changes, now that's the point where you have to say, okay, do I want to keep making player adjustments and decrease my min uniques to do that? Or do I want to stop my player adjustments and leave my min uniques? And then that is like a crossroad that we talk about, where it ultimately comes down to what is more important to the individual user, because not every user will have the same answer to that question, because there's not a wrong or right answer. It is really, what kind of player you are and what you value in your process and your lineups. So really good question there from support that came in. We will make sure to get timestamp recording back to you. And thank you, Scott, for jumping in and giving some feedback there. So second part of the question, let me get this over here. This one is a little bit longer. So this second part of the question says, secondly, similar to the back testing you've done to help with the default sliders, have you completed any back testing on individual player sizes / exposure percentages to determine what results in higher scoring lineups / more profitable entries? If so, what do you suggest is the best method that results in higher scores, or the method that helps identify the one lineup that can go off? I typically play the 20 max $1 tourneys on DraftKings and often find myself by following a comparable exposure percent that results from the pool percent, using a lot of players in my pool of 20 lineups, many just once or twice among the 20 lineups. I understand this helps diversify my player pool, which can reduce my downside, but also reduces my upside, as opposed to a smaller pool of players with higher exposures per player, which is less diversified and increases my downside, but also may increase my upside. It seems to me that having lower individual exposures, a larger player pool in my lineups, requires me to hold on. Sometimes these get messed up. It seems to me that having lower individual exposure / a larger player pool in my lineups requires me to get a little lucky by hitting on that one diverse lineup, and most nights with those lower / flatter exposure percentages, resulting in me losing a few dollars, but not all of my entry fees, as opposed to a smaller player pool that is more all or nothing. Any thoughts on what's more profitable long term? Okay, lots to unpack there. Really, just to kind of summarize what I think is, kind of the gist of this question is, should I be playing more spread out, or should I be playing more concentrated? That way, when the players that I am more concentrated on do well, I have a better shot of binking. I think that is like a solid summary of this question. And it's a good question, right? So I'm going to hop over to NBA. We're going to run a quick NBA build, and we're going to talk about this, right? If we are playing a 20 max contest. So let me just run some lineups here. I think, the big takeaway, or the thing that really stood out to me in this question, was that the user said that they follow a comparable exposure percent that results from the pool exposure. I think that, this is a decent way of getting spread out exposure, but I don't think it's better than using min uniques, right? So, and the reason I say that is because if you are following pool exposure as your kind of guide rail or light beacon to kind of show you where to go with your exposures, I think it misses out on some things, right? The thing that most stands out to me more often than not is that you are going to be decreasing your exposure to what SaberSim perceives to be the best plays, right? So, for instance, this 95% exposure we have to Diallo his pool exposure is 58. So right away, you're going to take away almost 40% exposure to a player that SaberSim thinks is really, really good, right? And that goes for every player. Like if we sort by pool exposure, Diallo is the highest exposed player in the pool at 58%. So if you come in here and then you start changing all of your max exposures to match the pool, you are going to be very spread out. But that's not what SaberSim is telling me is the best thing to do for this portfolio, right? That our min uniques feature is honestly the best way to get so how do I say this? So I think there's like two different types of diversity here that we're kind of talking about. We're talking about, so what I want to talk about is min uniques, which is saying that I can only have so many players the same in every single lineup that I take with me into my contest. And then what this user is saying is that I want to get spread out by just coming in here and decreasing my exposures. I think the former is better. And just because when you are adjusting min uniques, you are allowing SaberSim to more organically or more along what SaberSim wants to do, adjust your exposures. So like, for instance, I'm going to decrease this to 2, or I'm going to decrease my min uniques to 3 here. So I think Siakam moved here and Kawhi Leonard moved, right? Okay, so Siakam is at 60. We saw Kawhi Leonard come up, and let me see if I can see somebody else. Damian Lillard came up as well. And then if we go to 4, now we just saw a big shift in a lot of players, right? Diallo came down to 60%. Orlando Robinson actually maintained that high exposure. So basically what I'm trying to get at is that by using min uniques, you're going to allow SaberSim to decide who is worth keeping in those lineups as part of those 5 players, since FanDuel has 9 lineup spots. Who is going to be part of those 5 players that is going to essentially become more of your like core that SaberSim does not have to change, that those players that SaberSim can use over and over again. And then who is going to be delegated or bumped by this min unique threshold, saying, you know what, sorry, I got to change you out because I can only have 5 players the same in every single lineup, and I don't think you're worth it. I would rather get rid of you and keep this other piece, this other player or these group of players that I think are more valuable, right? SaberSim can handle that a lot better than you can, and it can do it in a much more efficient way where, like, Orlando Robinson is 53% in our pool, but still 75% here after applying 4 min uniques. So that tells me that SaberSim thinks he is a really, really good play on this slate, right? So I would say that, using this method, you can capitalize on diversity and you can still get more concentrated exposures, which is ultimately like the have your cake and eat it too. That you're kind of talking about here. Like, you want to have some more concentrated exposures that give you some better shots to take down a contest on a night and not be so spread out, as opposed to, you're saying like, or the opposite is be really spread out and only play a lot of guys, 1 or 2 times in a lineup. So I think that, another way you could look at this is that here we have min uniques at 4. We have a player pool of 39 players, right? If we decrease this to 1, and then we come in here and then we just start chopping all these guys down. So maybe I say, 60, 60, 55, 35, 50, 30. What I'm doing is I'm taking all of the top guys and getting close to that pool exposure, which is what you said that you were doing something around, and I'm just kind of rounding up right here. So then I'm going to change all those. I'm going to hit apply. Well, one, I couldn't do that, right? So that's one reason to do it the other way. But I'm going to walk some of these back. And then that seemed to work. It's unfortunate we couldn't do all the players we wanted to. Still, our player pool is not much different. So, but our top exposures are lower, right? So before we had 39 players with some guys at 75 exposure, and now we're at 65% with 35 players in the pool. So personally, I would highly recommend using the min uniques and giving that a shot. But good question. We are going to move on and talk about our next question here. All right. Scrolling up here, the next question I saw came in from Larson. I'm going to get this one in the chat. See some questions coming in the YouTube chat. When we get to all the questions before the end of the show, going to knock out these ones in Discord first and then hop over. All right. So Larson said, Andrew, on one of the recommendations from Jordan's SaberSim 5 rules for max DFS profit, he said use a unique lineup for every entry. How do I make sure the entries aren't duplicated when I run a sim for each contest? I have the 20 max membership, so I only put in 20 lineups per contest, even if it's 150 max. I play primarily on FanDuel. I do a build for each contest individually because some have different total entry sizes. Okay, this is a good question, Larson. So right off the bat, the only way I can think of to do the only way I can think to know, right? So I don't have an entries file. I'm not registered for any contests over here on FanDuel at the moment. Maybe we can go back to a previous week here. Let me see if I can do that. But basically what I'm getting at is that over on FanDuel, over on the entry editor, there is a slot for what I would call it's your lineup exposure and your entry exposure. And the difference is that if a lineup is duplicated, those two things are going to be different, right? So let me just pull this up really quickly and show you guys what I am talking about. So this is NFL main slate last weekend. So in this example, right? In this one, I had a unique lineup in every entry, right? So my lineup exposure is the same as my entry exposure. These two numbers are matched. If a lineup is duplicated, basically the entry exposure for players can be higher because they're, say I only built 150 lineups, I have 180 entries. So these players are going to be duplicated. So their lineup exposure, if they were in 15 lineups, might be 10%, but they got used in multiple entries. So their entry exposure might be like 15%, 20%, depending on my fill method, etc. So that is the easiest way to tell if your lineups are duplicated or not. What you can do about that, right? It's going to be hard to tell what build that came from, especially if you're building a separate build for every contest that you enter. So frankly, the good thing, well, if you see that and if that bothers you a lot, right, what I would do is I would begin to build just in general on a higher sim diversity. The higher sim diversity is, the smaller the buckets of sims that we are going to pull from, and it is less likely that those lineups get duplicated. So if you are, building a 20 max on, maybe like 1 to 10,000, 336, like whatever your settings are, just go ahead and bump that sim diversity up a tick or two. This should help. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. The builder is built to build in diversity into your lineups. I think the builder does a really good job of that in general. So not a major concern. That is one way you can spot check it. And then if it is something that you see coming up a lot, I would build on a higher sim diversity setting. All right. Question here from B. Hibby. Question is, what sportsbook do you pull NFL projected game odds from? My man Chuck jumped in here and answered his question. So thank you, Chuck. This is a correct answer. So Chuck said, my understanding is that SaberSim gets the game odds from simulating the games thousands of times. Vegas odds are used as a guide rail / sanity check, but SaberSim does not pull directly from Vegas. So this is true. Basically, we arrive at our own team totals based on the outcomes in the sims. We have a very, very good model, and the team puts a lot of work into the model. We sim the game thousands of times. These team totals that you see up at the top are not from Vegas, right? We are not pulling them from anywhere. We are checking, to make sure that we're not too far away, or we're missing something. Maybe somebody is out and we're not getting that input for whatever reason. So we do have sanity checks in place to make sure that we are not too far off. But that being said, we are not afraid of taking stances against Vegas. We do a lot of back testing and work hard on the model. We are okay if we are a little away from Vegas, because that is basically a conscious decision. But yeah, team totals come from the Sims, and we use Vegas as a sanity check. But thank you, Chuck. Appreciate you jumping in there, as always. All right. Now we got a question from Chuck here. And this is a long one, so I'm gonna break it into 2 parts. Chuck said, is it double counting to use SaberScore with ownership metrics, such as some products / average ownership? My understanding is that ownership fade only evaluates ownership at the individual player level, while the ownership metrics evaluate ownership at the lineup level. I just want to make sure that is the case. Okay, so to start this first part, Chuck, your understanding is correct. The way ownership fade works is that when we run the Sims, depending on what this ownership fade is set to, I think the easiest thing to understand is that the higher this is, the more this is going to hurt higher owned plays, and the more it is going to value lower owned plays. And then, inversely, if you were to decrease it. So basically, in this example, if we're looking at point guards, and if we run Sims, we are going to, let's say we have ownership fade all the way up to 10. We are going to, apply a metric, a multiplier. I don't know exactly what happens, but whatever projection we get for Gabe Vincent, we are going to, apply a multiplier, and that is probably going to hurt him because he is so high owned. And then, take somebody like LaMelo down here at 8%. We are going to apply that metric, and that is probably going to help LaMelo show up in more lineups because his ownership is lower, as opposed to Gabe Vincent's, whose is so much higher, right? So that is what ownership is doing. It is looking at ownership on a positional level, not like an overall lineup level. That is what SaberScore does. So your understanding of that is right. When SaberScore comes into account, that is after all the lineups are built. That is after the ownership fade has been applied. Now SaberSim is going to look at this entire lineup as a whole and grade it based on ownership metrics. So if you were to so getting back to the question, is it double counting to use SaberScore with ownership metrics such as sum, product, and average ownership? I wouldn't say so. So my understanding is that, the slider settings are inputs to SaberScore. What SaberScore is going to do is, depending on where this ownership fade slider is set, like basically the SaberScore algorithm is dynamic to accommodate different contests, right? It should not grade a single entry contest the same way it should grade 150 max contests or lineups for that contest, right? So SaberScore is dynamic based on the slider settings. So I think it's totally fine to apply a custom metric that includes SaberScore. I think that's totally okay. And then, getting down to the second part of your question here, going to get this in the chat. Second part says, I would also like to know your thoughts on my revised metric, including the percentiles, prevents ownership from going too low, provides the context of that particular slate, and ensures I'm not blindly fading ownership. For the sake of it, I included some product and average ownership because there are benefits and drawbacks to each method of calculating ownership, and I want my metric to be comprehensive. So it looks like Chuck is using 25th percentile, 50th percentile, 75th percentile, 85th percentile, SaberScore, negatively weighted, some ownership, product ownership, and average ownership. Chuck, this is quite the metric. My opinion is I think there is some sort of overlap with all of these ownership metrics. I realize that they're all different and they all have their pros and cons, but I think at the end of the day, they are all based on player ownership, and the players ownership is somewhat static, right? So I think that you're probably better off picking the one that you feel adds the most value for the type of contest that you're playing. So for instance, like I have a custom metric that I use for showdowns, and then I have a custom metric that I use for um, NFL small slates, and then I do not have a custom metric that I use for NFL large slates, but that's kind of how I split it up in my head. Is like, okay, showdown is one thing, NFL short slates are a different thing, and then NFL like large slates are a different thing, right? So instead of like try and create this all encompassing custom metric, I would probably just have different custom metrics for very specific things or game types or slate sizes, and try and think about it more that way, and then pick the type that matters the most to you in that format. For instance, maybe in showdown, product ownership means more to you / geo mean, and then in something like I don't know what you might be using this for, but in an NFL classic main slate, if the season wasn't over, maybe you care more about average ownership in that instance where you're not trying to, fit in like 5% owned plays with really chalky plays. Maybe you just want like the average ownership of all the players to be lower, but still fairly high owned. I think that in 2022 DFS, having a lineup full of 1% players on an average slate is probably not the right thing, right? Players are being owned more appropriately in this day in DFS, so you're not going to be able to find 1% owned players that are going to be smash plays, right? You might find one or two. So maybe on like a big NFL slate, you care more about average ownership and bringing the averages down across the board, and then as opposed to showdown, where you care more about like product ownership. So chew on that, think about it a little bit, and let me know if you have any follow up. All right. Question here from Gilliman. Question is, Andrew, how do I use the research build 0010 or 009 like you like it to come up with a solid 3 to 4 plays that will be viable leverage plays? This is a good question, right? So something that we've talked about, something that Matt talked about recently in our pro exclusive content. If you are on a pro plan, we came out with a new pro video, Matt breaking down his 50K showdown high stakes win. And he talks a little bit about this concept, right? So basically, the idea behind it, is that I'm going to get some water. Thank you, guys. All right, so basically the idea is that when you're running a 0010 build, you're basically trying to simulate optimals, right? You're trying to simulate optimals for a slate. Problem is, on a 7-game NBA slate, you probably don't need the optimal to win, right? It's going to be hard to find. You're probably not going to get there. So what can you do to do research, but not in such a optimal way, right? What you can do is you can take smaller buckets of sims. So that would be a 009 build where we're not taking single slate optimals, but we are bucketing the sims still, but just bucketing less of the sims, right? So that is kind of the idea between a 009, 0010. Both have their uses, and I would use a different one depending on what kind of slate or style, showdown classic, small slate, large slate I was playing, right? And kind of what I'm doing. So how would I do this, right? I'm going to run 009. We're going to talk about today's NBA slate, and we're going to see what this is showing us. All right, so just letting the build run here, and then we will begin talking about this. But I think that, kind of what I'm looking for out of a research build, right? First things first, I'm going to open this up to the entire pool size here. I want to see all of the lineups in my pool. whatever size pool you can build, I would always recommend building the max. Two things I'm really looking for. One is leverage. What high leverage plays do I have? And what do I think about the highest owned players on the slate? For instance, Gabe Vincent. I'm totally fine playing him, right? In our 500 research build sample size here, he is paying off his ownership, right? He is just about coming up as often in our sim lineups as he is owned. So I'm totally okay playing him like in most of my lineups, right? Somebody that I am looking away from is probably someone like Isaiah Stewart, right? Coming up half as often as his ownership says. Somebody that I'm interested in, probably Diallo, right? When we run those 20 lineups, he was in 19 out of 20 of them right off the bat. That makes a lot of sense, highly exposed in our top 20, very high positive leverage in our research build, right? So really, that's kind of what I would think of when, I'm looking at, who I want to have high exposure to. Are the top owned plays worth it? Who are my highest leverage plays? And then, just like as a safety net, who are my lowest leverage plays? That way, when I do come up into my, builds, say this is my actual build and I'm running my 20 lineups, I can write those guys down and I can go and look at them. So we only have Stewart in one lineup, totally okay with that. And then, we have Diallo, I spelled his name wrong, in 70% of our lineups here. So totally okay with that. Gabe Vincent coming up in a lot. He seemed like a fine play to me overall. So, SaberSim is going to apply these things the best it can, but that is one way for you to kind of spot check and make sure that you're in agreement with what SaberSim is doing. So that is how I would use a research build if I were running one on a nightly basis. All right, scrolling down here. Question from Gilliman. Gilliman's trying to hit me where it hurts with this one, guys. He said, Andrew, I see you have been on a heater lately. About a week ago, I noticed you have a lineup in the piggy that could have took down the flagship in FanDuel. Thanks a lot, Gilliman. How do you prevent this from happening going forward? Also, I am following with you in regard to the two videos and you recommended in regards to a solid NBA process. I watched them. What are you doing special that would be beneficial to adding to the process that you recommend? So I'm just messing around, guys. But, first off, I want to talk about, these two NBA videos. A lot of times people come on the show and they're like, hey, I want to talk about NBA strategy. What do you recommend for this slate, for advice in general? What I always recommend to people is go over to our YouTube channel. Just come over here to the homepage. You can go into this search bar here, and then all you got to do is type in NBA. Just type in a keyword, and then it is going to bring up all of our NBA content, right? This is a really good video where we had Max Steinberg on at the beginning of the season to talk about DFS or Daily Fantasy NBA. It's an hour, 44 minutes. A ton of questions came in. We've had a couple videos where I've walked through aspects of my process. This is the most recent one that we did 12 days ago. We had some time, so we dove into NBA a little bit. We did some stuff earlier, closer to the beginning of the season here, and I believe, this is talk about the profit plan. I believe it was these two, optimizing your NBA process, talking about player pool. Like guys, we do this show 5 days a week. We talk about NBA all the time, right? So I think just by coming in here, typing in NBA, there's a lot of content that probably gets lost, and we have so many videos, so some pieces get harder to find. So I would just come in here, type in a keyword, and you can find a lot of good advice about different things that you're concerned about, right? And we have like the playlist with Max here. You can type in ownership, and see what comes up, and all the times that we talk about ownership and different things along those lines. So this is always a really good resource for people that I don't think that many people utilize. So I just wanted to shine some light on that. And then getting back to the other part of this question, frankly, it says, you had a lineup in the piggy that could have taken down the flagship in FanDuel. How do you prevent this from happening going forward, right? The truth is that I am maxing the piggy, which is 150 entries, right? But I am not maxing the flagship. I am only just entering a subset of that 150 into the flagship, and I am filling via unique rank. So usually what it looks like for me is, I'll build 150 lineups, and then I'll enter, some lineups in the flagship, the quarter 20, the 222, as well as like some other contests, depending on what kind of night it is. And I will just take those from the 150, right? So the way to make sure that doesn't happen is to enter 150 lineups into the flagship, right? But that's not in the bankroll for me right now, right? That's not the way I want to. That's not the way I want to allocate my bankroll. I'd rather play turbos. I'd rather play night slates. I'd rather play showdowns. That's something that I've kind of really gotten into lately. Is not going like really like up the contest list, kind of trying to go out the contest list. Instead of playing just the main slate and playing all the contests up and down, what I'm trying to do is like, okay, I played the best contest on the main slate. Now let me go to the turbos. Now let me go to the nights. Now let me go to the showdowns, and kind of spread out sideways. That's something that I've been working on. So that's why I don't play as many lineups in the flagship, right? I think that's like a totally fine strategy. And the way I'm filling my contests is that I am taking, if I'm entering 20 lineups in the flagship, I'm entering the top 20 via unique rank. So I'm building 150, filling the first 150 into the 150 max, and then I'll take the next 1 through 20, as it starts over, put those in the flagship, and then go, maybe the next 20 in the 222, maybe the next 20 in the 25 cent. And however that falls, like, I'm totally okay with it because I'm using min uniques. I am taking advantage of diversity, and then I'm also taking advantage of SaberScore by filling unique rank. One thing we have changed is that if you come in to fill entries, and if you have an entry file here, unique rank is now the default fill method. It used to be rank, but that would cause people to duplicate their lineups. We felt unique rank was a better standard option. So that has recently changed. You guys might notice that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's okay. I think that, you got to keep the long-term kind of in perspective here. And if you continue to do the right things to grow your bankroll over time, I'm going to be able to enter more lineups into the flagship. I'm going to go from 20 to 50 to 75 to 100 to 150. And then at that point, that won't happen to me anymore. Right. But it is a process to get to that point. So it's all part of the journey. I'm totally okay with that happening sometimes, but yeah, it is unfortunate overall. All right. Question here from Naj. Naj said, hey, I've been doing late swap for 20 max NBA blindly and been pretty much breaking even or losing $2 or $3. I finally tried to take late swap in my own hands and setting exposures to certain guys I want to keep, and I did terribly. Should I go back to what I was doing, or what do you do with late swap? Naj, I think, the writing is on the wall on this one. I remember a similar question from you about a week or two ago. Just remember that, if you are breaking even or just losing a little bit of money, you are beating the rake. You are not paying the rake. The rake is about 15% on a nightly basis. So if you have $100 in entry fees right away, that as soon as lock hits, that is down to $85, right? 15% of that goes to the house. So if you are losing, $2 to $3 and you're playing 100, that means you're gaining that 12-ish% back out of that rake that is being taken. So breaking even is good on a night-to-night basis while you continue to just put in as many unique entries as possible and try and get to those times where you are going to bink and do really good and make some money. Part of our contest back testing in the behind the sims that Eric did with Jordan on the series, I believe last year now, was that, a winning player is expected to have about 6 to 8 winning days in a month. And if they're playing, 30 to 31 days out of the month. So you are going to lose on more days than you win. It's just that, on the days you win, you hope to have those exponential outcomes that kind of pay for all of the losses, and then you get profit on top of that. So keep grinding. Sounds like you're doing pretty good, and I would continue to trust late swap. All right, roll in here. Question from Jibo here. Jibo said, planning to have sims ready for US USFL or XFL seasons when they start? Jibo, I do not know the answer to that question. To be honest, I don't think so. It's not something I've heard rumblings about in the internal streets, but it is something that I will let the team know that people are asking for. The more you guys ask for stuff like that, the easier it is for me to push the envelope and get those things in motion. So if there are things that, other users or other people would like to see XFL or USFL sims, you guys mentioned those things to us, and that will help us push those up the priority list. So going to make a note here and going to take that one back to the team. Couple follow-up thoughts from Gilliman here. Gilliman said, thank you. Sorry about that, brother. I was just joking. How do you use a research build to create a player pool? Lastly, how do you use a research build to find a 1v1? For example, last night, is it a way the research build could show me Murray was a better play than Joker? To be honest, I don't really think, that's really what like a research build can do. Players have a lot of variance on a night-to-night slate. There are plenty of sims where Joker is better than Murray, and then there are some sims where Murray is better than Joker, right? And that is just kind of the way things happen sometimes. As far as, using the research build to create a player pool, not something I'm really too worried about myself when I'm building. The number of players that I have in my pool is not the biggest deal to me. I'm more concerned about, how diverse are the lineups that I'm taking with me, and what are my highest exposures? Do I agree with my highest exposures? And do I also agree with my highest leverage and negative leverage plays? And if I'm okay with those things, I'm usually not worried about too much else. The way I like to think about it is, I like to let SaberSim kind of handle the center of the steak, and I am here mostly to do risk management and to trim the fat off of the edges that I don't want to see, right? So that comes in the form of making my adjustments, checking lowest projected players. What are my exposures down there? What are my exposures to the highest owned? What are my highest leverage plays? What are my highest exposures to the highest value plays, right? So things are like that are what I'm really looking at from a risk management perspective. I'm not so concerned about the actual number of players in my player pool. All right. Question here from BK3NT, maybe B Kent. If I want to find a player's ceiling, would it make more sense to use the 99th, 95th percentile or the 85th percentile? So if you are just wanting to maximize upside in your lineups, what I would do is I would come in here to the lineup sorting method and I would change the percentiles to 99th. This is like the score that this lineup gets in across our entire sim database 1% of the time. I think that it's going to be a little more high risk, but using something like this is totally viable when this is a 1 in 100 outcome, especially if you're playing like, 150 lineups, 200 unique lineups, 300 unique lineups. Those instances, those lineups become more and more viable. Personally, I like to use 95th. I think it's a little more frequent, 1 out of 20, especially if you're playing something like a 20 max. So I would stick with 95th or 99th. These are kind of the outcomes that you're going to need to take down a GPP. Really is kind of what it comes down to. I think even at 85th, you're not always taking down GPPs at that level. So I would stick with the 95th, 99th. All right. Hopping over to YouTube chat. That is our last Discord question at the moment. I will hop back over there before the stream ends to see if any more questions came in. And B Kent did confirm it is in fact B Kent. So glad I got that right. And happy to answer any question you have. All right. Demetrius said, what's the name of the best NBA settings video? So Demetrius, I just hopped over to YouTube and covered some of our best NBA videos. I would just rewind a little bit, or if you're here, this question came in at the beginning of the show, I would check out those videos that we just touched on. Those are the best videos to start with. All right. Next question from Demetrius. I'm on SaberSim right now, and the projections are stuck on RPS projections. I can't change it to SaberSim. It's only doing this for NHL. So I don't have an RPS account. I'm assuming you know how to do this, where you can come over here and change the projection source. The Run Pure version of SaberSim should have something similar, a drop down where you can toggle back and forth. If this is still an issue, what I would do is I would either use the report a problem link up here at the top right, and then just say projections won't change from RPS to SaberSim for NHL. That'll go straight to our support team. That will help us to troubleshoot the issue and get it resolved really quickly. Or if you're in Discord, you can throw a message in the support channel and the team will be able to get to you there. So I would always do those two methods for any issue that you guys run across. All right. Marky Mark said, on Slate's 4 games and above, I would limit to no more than 3 players. That is a pretty standard rule. I think that, you should be careful using that rule as like a hard and fast rule. I think there are always exceptions to the rule, right? So I was noticing before the show that value on DraftKings is far and away better tonight than value on FanDuel. So, if we come in here and sort by value, Orlando Robinson is 10.93 value. That's huge, right? I think Miami has a bunch of players out. Hero, Robinson, Lowry, Bam, Jovic, Martin, Yurtseven. Basically just Jimmy Butler and nobody priced above 5,300. Like that's pretty crazy, right? So there's going to be a lot of value on the Heat tonight, and we can see it right here: 7 value, 7 value, 6 value, 6 value, 5, 5, 5. This might be an opportunity to let more than 3 Heat players into your lineup, right? So the way I usually like to, if I am using a rule like that, I typically don't. I typically handle it in the post build. But what I would do is I would say use no more than 3. Set this as a group automatic rule. So use no more than 3 players, group by team here. And then I would save this as manual. So when I would save it as manual, it's going to create 14 manual rules. And then I can come in here and hit this drop down, and then I can just delete the rule for Miami. So it's like, hey, have this rule for every team except the ones that I am okay playing more players from, right? So that's using manual rules allows you to create exceptions to the rule. Another thing you could do, which I didn't demo, and I'm going to go back because I deleted it, is that you can also change the number of players for a specific team, right? So I'm going to do my save it as manual, and then I'm going to go into Miami, and then I'm going to change it for Miami. Like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to play 5, but maybe I'm okay with 4. So then I could just come in here, and then the rule will be 3 for everybody except Miami. And just one thing, guys, we added this ability to name the rules. Although you changed the the guidelines of the rule, that is not automatically going to change the name of the rule anymore. So you would have to come in here and adjust it if that's something you want to see. So just a side note there, once that rule is saved, the naming is static and is not going to change based on the parameters that you're setting anymore. So just a side note for you guys there. All righty. Question from Aaron. Aaron said, what do you do with your crowns, and which method do you use to sort lineups for NBA? Typically, I use them to enter contests, right? It's free money, and it's a form of rake back. I know they changed it to start the year. They've introduced tier credits along with crowns. Kind of interesting. See how that plays out. I used to save them, but then I started. I went on downswing and then started entering contests with them. So I don't think there's anything wrong with using them for contests. Or I think that DraftKings has probably the best rewards program across DFS. With their dynasty rewards. So check out the shop. Maybe you like something in there. Maybe something that you always wanted that you never bought, and now your crowns can pay for it. So that's what I do with them, though. All right, question here for Brandon. This is from B Kent. He posted it in both, and we already answered it in the Discord. Snowman said, can you talk about own versus value with leverage? We could definitely talk about this. This is our last question, everybody. Looks like we are through with the Discord questions, and this is our last question in the YouTube chat. So if anybody has any questions, now is a great time to get them in. I'm going to get through this question, and we will see where we go from there. But I'm going to hop back here to FanDuel just because I have that build run already. And going to talk about this, right? So basically, leverage is just exposure minus ownership, right? So if we have 90% exposure minus 22.5, that is going to be 67.5% leverage. So that is what leverage is. And then we talk about own versus value with leverage. I think, value, what value is that it is taking the projection divided by salary times 1,000. So this is just a way of describing how many points per dollar we think a player is worth, right? Typically, good value in SaberSim terms. I know other sources do value differently, but anything usually above 6 is like what I would consider a discounted player, or somebody playing more than they usually do, or somebody that's mispriced, right? I think if you come into a slate and everybody is like under 6 value, I would probably consider that like a well-priced slate with not a lot of value. And, we went over to DraftKings and we saw that there's just tons of value today with some of the pricing and the way these players are priced. Like all these players are almost min price. Min price is 3,000 and 31, 3,000, 3,300. Like guys getting 25 minutes at min price is crazy. 25 minutes, 30 minutes. So that is a lot of minutes for very low priced guys. I think over on FanDuel, Orlando Robinson was 5,700 as opposed to the 3,100 over here on DraftKings. So definitely salaries were probably released before news came out about the Heat sitting so many players. But that is where you get an edge, right? Salaries are static, and minutes, projections, all those things can change. So that is where, edge basically comes from. Talking about leverage, right? I'm not sure, how much more I really want to talk about it, but, I think that it's important to understand, how much leverage do you have to the highest owned guys? I think there's something to be said, 30% leverage on Gabe Vincent is not the same as 30% leverage on somebody like Jock Landale, right? In this example, over 50% of lineups in the pool are going to have Gabe Vincent. So if he does good, there's still so much of the field you still have to beat out, even though you have more than the field does. Take somebody like Jock Landale, he does really good. The pool of viable lineups that can win the contest, in theory, goes down significantly. If he just like blows the slate away, right? Because there's only so many lineups with him in it. So now you're competing against a lot less lineups overall, and you probably have a better chance of taking something down if he goes off at high leverage, as opposed to somebody like Gabe Vincent, right? Not to say like one play is better than another, but I just want to say that, leverage is relative to the player and the player's ownership. So that's just something like kind of food for thought, something to think about, something to keep in the back of your mind there. You might not need as much leverage or exposure to somebody like Jock Landale as you need to Gabe Vincent to have an edge over the field. I think that is kind of the point I was kind of getting at with that comment. But Snowman, let me know if there's anything about, ownership, exposure, leverage, a value that we didn't talk about that you specifically want to know, and we can circle back on that later. But that being said, everybody, had a nice long show today. Appreciate all the questions, coming in early. We had a solid queue of questions. If you guys have questions throughout the day, throw them in the Office Hours channel. We will get to them all on tomorrow's show. We'll be right back here tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, for our Wednesday show. So until then, good luck in your contest, and I will see you all then. Take care.